I'm going to the river. You stay here.
The water is quite cold, okay? And now we approach. They appear to be playing a game with bits of paper.
Well, there's a clip from a video about Underwater Archaeologist. That's an upcoming show at the Vancouver International Children's Festival. But the real show combines live performance and virtual reality. Well, Jay Dodge is with us today. Jay is both an actor and co-creator of Underwater Archaeologist. So great to have you here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Now, clearly there's some diving involved here, but just tell us what's going on.
Well, basically, it's a piece about imagining the future, and there's a lot of questions in the future. But this future is a kind of a hopeful version of the future, where yes, climate change happened, but a lot of other great things happened too. And so, in this piece, the Underwater Archaeologist, which is a character that I play, discovers two people that have been living underwater, anticipating the water's rise, and they've stayed under there for 60 years. And I'm an archaeologist that takes the audience with me down as we kind of make first contact with these people who kind of have been living in the past, our future, kind of their past.
And what kinds of discoveries do you make?
Well, don't want to give too much away, but it's kind of like this. Like if you imagine how Shakespeare spoke in Shakespeare's time, that language, you have to kind of decode that language a little bit, but it's also very exciting to hear. Mm-hmm. Well, if we imagine ourselves in the future, this piece kind of looks back at how we might look at today. So the same way that we look back at Shakespeare's time, people in the future are going to look back at our time, and well, they're probably going to raise an eyebrow or two, right? So that's kind of what the piece explores with the intersection of this character that we imagine to be in the future, right, meeting with two people who are kind of trapped in our present, but his past.
Okay, now what were some of the challenges in incorporating virtual reality into this?
Well, it's funny because it's for us at Boca de Lupo, it kind of seems like a departure as a theater company to be doing virtual reality. But our journey in theater has always been to bring the audience to like fun and interesting places. So some folks may remember we used to do these huge spectaculars. We called them free, outdoor, all ages, roving spectaculars in Stanley Park, where we put actors, 80 feet up in the trees. And we've taken audiences all sorts of places. And this one, our artistic director, Sherry Yoon, I got my diver's license because like my friend's wedding, one of these kind of weird things. And then she goes, there's a show here. And then we, as we kind of developed the idea, we realized we couldn't take the audience with us, right? So that's where virtual reality came in. And as the technology got better and we could use these 360 cameras underwater, we thought, now's the time. We can actually, do part of the show in the real world where we can touch each other, and then a part of the show where we actually take the audience underwater with us.
Oh, so you actually started diving through this project?
Well, I started diving and then this project came to be, but yeah, it's all kind of followed, yeah.
Wow, it's a beautiful place to be diving in BC waters as well.
It really is.
Well, and I was going to say how cool that the Children's Festival is back on again. I mean, how important is that to the city?
It's huge. I mean, for us as a producing theater company, the pandemic kind of started with a cancellation for us that was a co-production with the Children's Festival. Iron Peggy, which was a show about 3 Indigenous snipers and written by Marie Clements. And we were about to go on tour with this show that had been a wonderful success at the previous year's Children's Festival. And then, of course, that all got shut down. So it's very exciting to have people back, kids back at the Children's Festival and to have live performance happening again. Yeah.
Well, and what about targeting this particular production to a particular age? We're talking sort of 9 till 12 in there. Were you very conscious of that in your approach?
Absolutely. Like we did a lot of research, as we do with any production, and part of that research is looking at the form. And with the virtual reality goggles, there's like any technology. There's sort of recommended ages, and still, to some degree, some unknowns about how this technology affects us, and so we're being erring on the safe side of use of the technology. So they're only in the headsets for about 15 minutes, and the recommended age limit is kind of what we're going with, which is 12 or 9 to 12, and we've geared the content that way too. I mean, it's not it's a fun and engaging kind of like project. I think that any kid could get. Like I'm really not a fan of like talking down to young audiences, but at the same time, there's a difference between a kindergartner and a grade 4 and a grade 7, and so we thought 4 to 7 was kind of the sweet spot for this content for this show.
Okay, so in light of this experience then, and as you're saying, you're diving and you say, hey, we got a project here. As you're putting this project together, do you have that, hey, moment, we might be able to use this in future productions on a larger scale, an adult audience?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think like both the content of this piece, it actually comes from a slightly larger suite of works that we called Expedition, which are exploring climate change from this kind of future speculation idea. So imagining ourselves 100 or 150 years in the future and trying to get some like premature wisdom of hindsight is kind of how I articulate it. So we've already done some work that does engage an adult audience, and we look forward to doing more, absolutely.
I see. And what's this all been like, this COVID darkness that descended a few years ago? I mean, for artistic people, it's just been interesting to see how some people either retreated and waited or some people got creative. What was it like for you?
Well, for us, we're in a kind of a privileged place as creators, so we don't run the festival, but we put shows in the festival for the Kids Fest, for instance. And so we were able to kind of, pivot, overused word, but, and do creative projects even though the pandemic was going on. So we did this project, lovely project called Plays to Perform at Home, where we engaged playwrights to write plays that you could do around the dinner table or the campfire, so the audience becomes the performer. We have been dipping into this virtual reality stuff a little bit, because we were interested in it before the pandemic, but this gave us an opportunity to kind of do a deep dive, because I think there are a lot of similarities between virtual reality and 360 video and theater. So for instance, we're here, and I would say TV and film is the art of framing something for an audience. Whereas in theater, it's the craft of kind of drawing the focus of the audience. Like, we use all the craft of the actor and the lighting and everything to get people to look at a particular place at a particular time. Well, that's the same thing in virtual reality, And I think one of the cool things about this project is, virtual reality, gaming, obviously comes to mind. But won't this be cool that for some of these kids, their first virtual reality experience, which is something that's going to become more and more part of our lives. It's not everything, but it's something. And their first experience will be an artful experience as opposed to video games or other kind of advertising. So we're excited about that. But back to kind of your question about the pandemic. It's been a ride for everybody. The stutter stepping. Are we starting? Are we not starting? But I think where we're at as an industry now, and I talk to a lot of my colleagues nationally, is I think we're ready to live with the pandemic as opposed to the lockdowns and everything. It's going to mean things change. Some theaters are going to have to figure out how to use understudies or figure out what to do when we have to cancel a show because a bunch of actors have COVID, and hopefully the audiences will understand that we're in a bit of a different world, but we also need to move forward.
Flexibility and resiliency, right?
Yes.
There we go. That's along with pivot. We've been using those a lot too.
It's true.
Jay, thank you so much for coming in.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. This has been great.